Good.
Okay,
Shoot, what do
here.
you want to know? What do you want to know?
Okay, so welcome everybody. It's with great pleasure to introduce to you Jean-Michel Pilc on piano and composition. We are going to talk about composition predominantly, and this is hosted by Hudson Jazzworks, which has been going on now for our 15th year, I believe. It's
Yes.
going to be our 15th year.
Mhm.
Together with me and Armen Donelian and Rose, we've been doing this summer program, and Jean-Michel has been a guest in the program also, which was amazing. And I'm really looking forward to this. First of all, just to have a proper introduction to Jean-Michel. I got to know his playing in 1995 when I came to New York first. 1997, I saw you play first. 1997 when I came to New York, and I was immediately blown away by just his creativity and his imagination, and also his trio, which was with which you still play with Francois Moutet and Ari Hanek, amongst many other projects that you do. But I became an immediate fan for sure. And later on, I got the pleasure to play with you in different situations. And ever since, you've always been on the top of my list of musicians to check out to see what's going on. So I'm super excited that you are able to make the time to just to come and hang with us and talk about composition. Maybe Armin, you want to say something also as introduction?
Well, thank you, Jean-Michel, for joining us. And my name is Armen Donelian, and we at Mark and I have been doing the Hudson Jazzworks now for some time, as he said. It's a summer program in August normally with up to 10 participants. And we talk about composition, ear training, rhythm training, ensemble, improvisation, so on and so forth. And then at the end, we have a concert in a public space called Hudson Opera House. And Mark and I have been teaching together now since, 2000 actually. We've been doing this for quite some time. And it's really a pleasure to be doing the jazz composition forum that came out of the workshop last year during COVID, because we were limited by not being able to do a live workshop. So we decided we'd go online, and we invited composers from around the world to join us and submit some compositions. And Mark and I reviewed them on Zoom like this. And we just had a fantastic time, and we decided, oh, well, let's do this again. And that's how this program came about. So Jean-Michel, I'd like to ask you a question just to get things kicked off. Scratching my head, and I've got something written out here. It's just a few words. And it goes like this. The late Chick Corea once said in a 1975 interview that the musician's real product is not the music, but the experience created in the person who hears it. To the young artist, the idea of discovering fulfillment in providing enjoyment for others may seem abstract, altruistic, and circuitous. After all, why do great musicians or any musicians play music and compose music? If one is lucky, one can please others through performing and composing one's music and perhaps even survive. Young artists often feel conflicted between pursuing their art form and pleasing audiences. They become obsessed with associating with top-ranked band leaders, appearing in high-profile venues, accumulating press clippings, keeping up with technology, and always recording. A dilemma is posed by these two urges that run on parallel tracks that, unless one is very fortunate, rarely intersect. That is the fundamental joy of pleasing one's inner self and the existential need to survive and prevail in a highly competitive profession. Can you please tell us about your personal experience balancing and navigating these and other related issues in your life as a composer and performer, in particular, the relationship between art and commerce?
Wow, that's quite a question. First of all, I want to thank you guys for inviting me. I haven't had a chance yet to Thank you for this today, and also for the wonderful experiences that we had in the past. We had a few, and it was always fantastic and highly creative and satisfactory and fun. And I love your sense of humor and your energy, and uh, and that's enough for the compliments. Now I have to remember the question you asked me, which is hard because it's already gone. That's how short my attention span is. Old age, I guess. Uh, I think it's easy to say many things about music, and at the end of the day, you always realize that anything you say is never right. There is always a way to disprove any sentence pronounced about music. There's always exceptions. There are always counterexamples. There are always things that get said, and then you can say, well, that's not true because this and because that. I think the problem with music is music is music. That's what it is. And people tend to put words on music, and they want to talk about, for example, what is the product of music? I couldn't tell really, with all due respect to the late Chick Corea, of course, a towering figure of jazz music. I don't know what the product of music is. Look at Schubert. I'm practicing his sonatas these days, which are, I'm not lying. They're on my piano, as you can see. And it's some of the music of the most incredible beauty ever written. Those sonatas were totally unknown for over 100 years after he died, for some of them. Some of them were known a bit before, thanks to the efforts of Robert Schumann or Liszt or people like that. But many of those here have been like played for the first time in 19 something. He was dead since over a century. The reason why he wrote those is because he had no choice. They just poured out of him. Schubert had to get out those things out of his system.
Mm-hmm.
Did he know that they would be successful one day? Of course not.
Mm-hmm.
Neither did Van Gogh, by the way, or Modigliani or Bartók. I can give you a long list of people who have created in total, like without being known. Bach was not that known during his lifetime. Even Mozart, at the end of his life was pretty broke. Some people were much more successful than he was. So I think at the end of the day, for me, yeah, I had a career that's not exactly what I would have expected. In some cases, it's not exactly what I would have hoped. I say it very frankly. But the thing is that when I sit in front of a piano, I don't have a choice. It has to come out. That's what I do. Is it going to be successful now? Is it going to be successful 100 years from now? I had this conversation with my son. He said, Daddy, I have a feeling maybe you have lots of success after you die. And I just laughed. I said, well, I'm in good company then. This guy, Schubert, and so many others. I think for me, an artist should not worry about that. What is the product? Are people going to like? People sometimes like some stuff that I did that I don't particularly like. And some stuff that I think is really good, they don't even know it exists. So I can't really worry about that. If I was immensely successful, like somebody like Chick was, maybe I would see things differently. But in my shoes, the only thing I can do is sit in front of the piano by myself or with other musicians and let it come out of me and hope for the best. What the future will bring, it's not. I don't think it's worth worrying about things that you cannot control. And I cannot even control my music, by the way. It just comes out of me. Sometimes I'm like, wow, why? Who's this guy playing? Sometimes I feel like almost a stranger to myself. I'm sure you know that feeling. And it's a generally good sign, by the way. So I would say that's all I worry about, really. And also I worry about listening to my music as a listener and feeling good about what I hear. For years I listened to my solo playing, for example, on recordings, and I was like, oh, yeah, it was fun playing, but now that I listen to it, I don't like it. It's not clear. It's lots of notes. It's this and that. Since a few years now, I would say maybe 5, 6 years, I'm starting to really enjoy listening to my solo recordings. And, to me, that's worth any success in the world, because I know that what comes out of me is something that now makes me happy when I listen to it. That's a big fulfillment. I say it, with no particular pretension or megalomania of any kind, but even though I'm an egomaniac. Who are we kidding? But that to me is success in my eyes. Being able to express something, and then listen to it later and say, well, that's me. That means something to me. It came out. Will people like it, see it, hear it? I don't know, but I relate to it. It's my thing, and it comes out of me, and it's sincere, and it means something to me. That to me is success. I would say that's the only definition of success that I have, really.
Well, I guess the reason I was asking the question is because there's this other issue, which is how to survive.
You have to be lucky. I think the problem is when you play music, you can't worry about that. I mean, okay. I mean, there are different ways of making music. Obviously, some people really make music for success. They write hits and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure somebody like Paul McCartney, when he writes a tune, he hopes that it's going to be, and it worked. But he's also a genius in creating, beautiful melodies and stuff like that. And I think it's a way of making music that I found really fascinating, and I think people who have that double gift, so to speak, are really very lucky. I admire it, and I absolutely don't criticize that. I think when it's done with such a degree of genius, you can just say, wow, congrats, it's fantastic. People like in the history of music had that gift, like people like Rossini, people like Verdi, people like, I mean, who else, people like, I have trouble finding, I would say people like Schubert, except it took so much time, but his melodies should have been hits, if I guess he didn't know how to sell himself,
What about Jean-Michel Pilc?
Like I said, it's out of my hands, really. I mean, I've never been very gifted for goal-oriented music. Let's put it that way. Which means some people, they make music with a certain goal. They have an agenda, They want to be famous. They want to be successful. Sometimes it's not even that. They want to make music with a specific concept, with a specific, I would say, angle. Call it like that, And it sometimes gives fantastic results. I'm not again, it's not a criticism at all. And it's great that people make music in very different ways, But for me, it's never really worked because that's not my personality. When I start playing, I can't have a goal because the music has its own agenda and I cannot control it really. And so I'm like I would say I am at the good grace of music and of the outside world that would make with my music what it wants or doesn't want. But at the moment I make music, it's out of my hands, so to speak. So if I sit at the piano and I start playing, like. That something comes out of me. I don't even know where it comes from. It's something that it is what comes out of me now. If I play again in like a minute, something else will come out. I don't have much of a control over it.
So, to hook into that, right? I always have known you as a very intuitive player, which I feel is one of your great strengths. I've seen you in different situations, and you always are able to handle pretty much anything. That's my perspective.
I wish.
That's really what I feel and what I have witnessed. It's not just an opinion. I've seen it happening. So then the question is that because it's intuitive and you're not really project oriented. So when you actually compose, how do you organize your materials? How do you come to your material? How do you develop it into a format to bring on the bandstand? So tell me a little bit about your process and,
I thought about it in advance because I knew the question would come, and I interrogated myself. I was like, how am I going to be able to answer that question? and something came to me because I wrote a book a few years ago which is more centered on improvisation. It's called The Art and Heart of Improvisation. It's about music. It's really like, I consider myself first and foremost an improviser, but I've written lots of tunes. Some of them, I think are pretty successful. Some of them are, like I think a good reflection of who I am. So I interrogated myself, how does that work? And to me, I'm going back to something I said in my book a few years ago. To me, it's a bit like quantum mechanics. I know I'm going to go scientific on you guys, so don't be scared, but I'm going to keep it simple. I've lost my IQ has gone down over the years, so I can make it complicated even for myself. But quantum mechanics teaches you that some things are in a certain state until you measure them, and then it's another state, like wave and particle. To me, a composition is it's like almost like the wave collapses and becomes a particle. That's what a composition is. For example, I prepared a few recent compositions that I wrote. The writing is pretty much horrible because I just wrote them like super quickly. But there was this melody that came to me the other day. So that's the beginning. Then you have a bridge, and then you have another A with different chords, and then there are other pieces, that kind of create a suite. At the moment I wrote it, I remember that was a month ago approximately. I was in at home on my little upright piano. It was there. It was there. I cannot express it more precisely than that. It was there. That thing was there. And now I'm like, I go to my piano and I know it's there, but I don't know what it is yet. So I sit at my piano and I start playing, and I hear chord and I hear a melody, and sometimes I hear the melody first, then the chord, sometimes the opposite. Mainly the melody really comes first, mostly. But it's there. It's an object, really. It's not like, oh, I have this melody, now I'm going to put a chord progression and then people. No, it's an object. It's a 3, 4, 5-dimensional object, and I'll keep it at 3 dimension, not to make. And that object, I have to paint it. I have to catch it. I have to measure it, really, like quantum mechanics. I have to seize it. So this thing was there. I sit in front of the piano. I start playing. Yeah, no, that's not what it is exactly. So I look a little bit. And then after, I would say 15 minutes, it was on the paper. I have the experience of finding that thing, but it took a minute to just grab it. Yeah, I know it's there, but okay. Oh, okay. Here I have a handle. It's there, and then you can see like 10%, 15. It comes. It's like the iceberg. And then at the end, it's what I have here. I know. I recognize it, and I know it's what was there from the beginning. So after that, I can, of course, I could improve it, change a chord and this and that, and I do that sometimes because I feel like I have another idea coming, and I move. I just change the object. It's not a sacred thing, but mostly it's 95% of it is already there before I even touch the piano or the paper. It's not that I hear it; I feel it. It's different, That's how I work as a composer. Some composers don't work like that at all. They have concept, they have calculations, and again, I think it's wonderful. But the way I compose is really like, sometimes I go to my piano and I know there is something waiting to be written. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't hear a thing, but I know there is something. And as soon as I play the first note, I say, oh, okay, I'm starting to see it. It's like a mist. It's like a ghost, and then you see it more and more clearly. And then it's there.
Sometimes I wish I could take a wire and attach it to my brain, and then put it to a loudspeaker so I can.
Yeah.
So because I know exactly what you're saying. It's like there's a feeling, then it's giving expression to that feeling.
Yeah, it's it's even more than that. It's like really like it's a piece of art that's in your mind that is dying to come out, and then you just need to take the action to put it down, you know. But it's so to me, it's the same, exactly the same essence as improvisation, except that there is this also this willingness to keep it as it is, you know. But when I improvise, I have sometimes the same feeling. I see the objects come in my vision, and I'm like, oh, okay, this thing is coming. Let's play it, you know. So it's not that different. I think the essence is very, very similar,
Hmm.
really,
Hmm.
you know. So I always say that improvising is writing with invisible ink, you know.
Hmm.
And you know, and a lot of what I've done recently, improvising at the piano, you could call it compositions. You know, I like improvisation when it becomes an instant composition, and I like a composition when it's the materialization of something that could have been improvised. You know, so the essence is very similar.
Hmm.
What is so? I first of all, you know, as a saxophone player, it took me a while to get comfortable on the piano, because one of the handicaps is I hear something, I hear a chord, and then I go to the piano like and then I have to figure it out.
No,
By the time I figure it out, I miss my opportunity to grab the next moment.
I see what you mean.
Now I'm more comfortable on the piano, so and I do feel the difference in my composition method, which is one of the big things that I tell my students, saxophone players, is definitely get your piano chops together to a certain extent, because it just widens the whole experience of composing. Now, one next question that I have to ask is what would be advice that you would share to a young aspiring composition? How to start, or with what kind of mentality to get started?
That's a big one because I think nobody's the same. I think everybody is very unique. Somebody just got an email. That some everybody's different, really. I mean, you know, if I look at my compositions and I look at some other people composition or the way they write, or it's so different. If I look at myself 20 years ago, I don't even recognize myself in the way I write. I wrote music at that time. I wouldn't write the things that I wrote at the time. I'm not saying they're good or bad, you know. I mean, they're just not me now. That was a different person, you know. So it's hard to say. I would say to me, you know, and maybe that goes back to Armen's question about the survival thing. You know, to me, you can't bullshit yourself. Meaning, you know, uh, you are one musician. You know, you are someone with a set of talent, with a set of possibilities, with a set of limits, etc. You have to find that person and let it do his or her thing. You can be like, oh yeah, but I'm gonna do this because you know somebody told me to do this, and maybe you know, and that's why so many of the most, I would say, honest and the people with the most integrity had lots of problems surviving, and sometimes didn't. You know, starved or committed suicide like Van Gogh. You know, because Van Gogh, for example, to me is a great example. He painted like nobody else. At the time, it must have looked crazy or even stupid to many people because it was like just so unusual and special and crazy. And he was crazy on top of it. So, you know, and I think that in a way, but he didn't bullshit himself. That's who he was. He never painted one spot of paint that was not him. Never, never, not one thing. Same with Modigliani, for example, you know, and same with Schubert. And you know, and Schubert wrote very beautiful and successful melodies, but he was not very gifted for marketing, I guess. But what I'm saying is that those people were really like centered on who they were. This is who I am, you know. And I think the advice I would give to any artist would be yourself. That's find out who you are, find out what you want to find out what comes out of you naturally and let it come out. And put all you can in terms of technique and craft and everything so that there is nothing in your way. For example, if I play the piano and I play all kind of wrong notes and I'm not sure about my technique, it's going to be in the way of who I am. It's like not being able to speak correctly. So I work on my technique, I practice every day, etc. But it's not because I want to be the biggest virtuoso on earth, which I won't be anyway after people like Artatum or Horowitz, But it's because I want that person that I am to be able to express what I want without being impaired by the instrument. And when I write a composition, I don't want the instrument to be in my way either. But I don't think, to go back to what you said at the beginning, I don't think you need to know a whole lot of piano to really find the fine lines of your compositions. You really need the instrument to kind of help you a little bit. The piano doesn't compose, you do. I do, you do. The piano is a piece of wood, it's plastic and metal. It doesn't compose anything. So I think the piano, what you just need to do is, know the basics of the instrument, but keep like Armen said, keep that wire in your brain with the music going out and say, okay, this is what I hear, and use the piano as, just as a little translator, really. That's your instrument here. That's where the instrument is, not there.
Yeah,
So I don't.
I often think of the great blues masters, the Mississippi Delta blues guys, and they didn't have a lot of technique on guitar, but boy, their music is timeless because
Yeah,
it came from the heart,
yeah,
as
yeah,
well as the
exactly.
head, and they were true to themselves, to their.
Exactly. They were who they were. Somebody like Jimi Hendrix is another great example. People talk a lot about, oh, you have to know all kind of music. So I'm like, some people made the most wonderful music and they didn't necessarily, you know, play 25 styles. They just played one style. Look at Monk, look at Chet Baker, look at Jimi Hendrix. They did what they knew how to do, what they loved to do, and that was it. And again, Modigliani, Van Gogh, etc. So I think you have to really relate to yourself and say, well, this is what it is, and that's what's difficult in the academic world is that people sometimes with all the academic environment and peer pressure and everything, you tend to lose sight of who you are. It's very difficult to keep the focus. I always said to my students, the number one word for me is focus. You have to be like a laser ray. If the light starts going everywhere, then you won't find that object, that you're looking for. We go back to quantum mechanics, I guess. Focus.
Yeah, there's so many distractions today for young musicians coming up between the technology and, like we were talking earlier, the commercial part. And, sometimes it's like, where do I start? Where do I begin? I should do it this way. I should do it that, because they're not focused on who they are. They lose
Yeah,
sight.
that's true. That's true, Armen. But if you read books written about Brahms or Stravinsky, they had the same problems.
Yeah.
Really. They had the exact same problem. It was not the internet or the TV or whatever. It was like Brahms was like, well, Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies. Every single one of them is a towering piece of genius. Why should I write a goddamn symphony? And he ended up writing 4, which are wonderful, of course. But he had the exact same problems. What should I do? And then Wagner shows up and he's like, oh my God, this guy should. Now there's Wagner. Should I do like him and write an opera? You always, I think all over history, you had those same problems. They are human problems. Should I do like this guy? Should I imitate this person? Should I copy that one? What should I do now that there is this genius? It's been like that. Survival, making money, having something to eat, raising your kids. I think those are timeless preoccupations. Now take different, they take a different shape with Facebook and the internet and you name it. But I think the subject is timeless. It's always been like that, really, honestly.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that's been a really great lesson.
I don't even see it as a lesson. I just spoke from the heart.
I have one more question. So a question is so just more from a compositional point of perspective.
Right.
So so I have an idea and everything, and then how would you go? Did you ever uh, develop a method or an idea of how to do a counterpoint or multiple voices, or how would you go about it if you, for example, have multiple instruments, right? So in other words, there's of course this whole lineage of counterpoint writing. I'll go back to Joseph Fuchs and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of different ways of writing 2, 3, or 4 voices, which you see in the big band area, from Count Basie and Ellington to Maria Schneider and so on. Is there anything that you could share with the new generation of, you know, some ideas that you have, how you approached writing for multiple instruments from a counterpoint point perspective?
Well, do you have another hour?
I do.
No, I'm going to try to make it rather synthetic. First of all, I don't consider myself as an arranger, really. I did a few things for like medium band and stuff. I never really wrote for big band. My writing is a bit weird because I hear this idealized band in my head and I write for it. And then I play it with a non-idealized band and I'm always like, oh my God, it's not. You know, arrangers, they have this genius to hear what it's going to sound like for real. That's what a real arranger is. For me, sometimes I hear this idealized version and then, oh, but you wrote this note on the instrument. And I'm like, could you play pianissimo? And the person says, no, at that register, I can't, you know. And so, you know, I've never really, I would say I've probably should, if I had wanted to be a better arranger, I should have studied more and practiced more and write more and, you know, and I never really did it for you know, a variety of reasons. One of them being that I focused probably a bit too much on being the best pianist I could be, you know, and I'm not, again, I'm in good company. I mean, people like Errol Garner or Ahmad Jamal or even Bill Evans, they never really wrote for medium band or big band or stuff like that. You know, they really focused on the piano, which is a lot to focus on already. But I would say, you know, to answer your question, maybe in a practical way, let's suppose that I want to play a 2-voice thing, completely improvised 2-voice thing. So I'm going to start. So you see, 2-voice. And at the same time, I'm talking to you. So my intellect doesn't really work, you know, in terms of the note that I'm playing. But what I know, while I'm doing that the 2 voices are very clear to me. You see that crossing on the F sharp, I could see it come from a little bit before. That's a chord, I cheated a bit. And so it doesn't sound random, right? You could really hear 2 melodies, you know, playing with each other. Okay, just to end on a major chord. So if you listen to that again, you're going to realize that the 2 melodies make sense. You know, it's not like if I do like now.
So in the end, you're old school after all, because you did end with the major chord.
Yeah, right. No, but what happens when I'm doing this is that I can hear the 2 melodies very clearly in my brain, like in a stereo. How did I cultivate that? Well, I took all of Bach's inventions and practiced them slowly, singing every voice from the left to the right, you know. And I did that sometime in jazz, you know, practicing bass line. Etc., trying to make melodies and bass lines. And I practiced bass lines very slowly, singing them, so singing the left hand while I was playing it with the right hand. Because many pianists don't hear their left hands. They just hear the right, you know, they sing like crazy with super loud voices, and then the left hand, they don't know what they're doing. They don't hear it. They are just mono, you know. And so I always realized that if I wanted to do what I really hear in my mind, I have to have the stereo and then, you know, add maybe 3, 4 voices and get the quadriphony or something. But I practice by singing everything I play. And of course, practicing Bach is paramount, but also practicing bass line and stuff. So slowly but surely, I could hear that stereo come in focus. It wasn't there, I would say, at that degree like 20 years ago. You know, I could feel that I always heard the right hand much better than the left. So once I got that down, that I would say stereo hearing on the piano, I realized that in my mind, when I heard music in my mind, the voicing became much clearer because my mind was getting contrapuntical, you know, even away from the piano. Those exercises that I did at the piano made my brain more able to actually, I think it's just a multitasking. It's a multitasking thing.
Yeah.
And so suddenly when I wrote for different instruments, I wrote melodically with different melodies. And that's the difficulty of my music. And that's why, you know, I've always kind of given up on the intention of doing a band, is that it would require a lot of rehearsals because it's voices are very melodic. They are not, I don't write harmonically. I don't write like that. You know, I don't know how to do that really well. I tried and it sucks. I didn't like the result. But if I write melodically, then I like the result, but it takes too much rehearsal time in those days, you know. So I guess that's probably the reason why I never. But if you listen to some of the pieces, you know, I'm gonna put myself in good company again and sound a bit megalomaniac. But some of classical music, contemporary classical music, if you don't rehearse it a lot, it sounds like a complete mess because it's written with lots of those melodic things and lots of micro clashes and stuff. And if you don't rehearse like a lot, it just sounds like mistake over mistake. Whereas some people, they have the genius of writing stuff that can sound good right away. That's what some great arrangers for big band, they write big band arrangement and the big band play them and it sounds great immediately. It's another form of talent, which I don't think I have developed, and I'm only human. I had to focus on some priorities, but it's a talent that I admire. But it's a talent that I don't have as much as, like I said, that melodic way of composing, which requires more work to sound good.
Which is incredible, yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jean-Michel. That's always a great pleasure. Of course.
Well, it was a pleasure for me. I really hope you enjoyed it. It was super easy. I just, like for music, I'll just let it come out of me the way I feel, and I hope
it comes from a lot of experience and you know, decades of music. So that's why it's easy.
Don't remind me of my age, please.
I'm talking about ancestors, not you.
By the way, you and Armen seem to be on the big beard thing, right?
This is not a fashion statement. Trust me. This is just laziness. It will come off as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm due for a trim too.
Yeah, I did one a couple of days ago.
I think in this time of COVID, everyone is kind of letting go of the formality.